welcome to the Katie Halper Show. I'm your host, Katie Halper, with my co-host, Gabe.
What's going on? It's Gabe Pacheco. I'm here.
Gabe Pacheco is here, bringing the enthusiasm, the excitement, the joie de vivre, if you will.
Wearing my favorite flannel.
He's wearing a flannel. It's
enjoying
very cute.
Hump Day.
Hump Day. That's the Yiddish pronunciation. It's the Katie Halper Show. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. We're also on iTunes, SoundCloud, and we're here, of course, with our engineer at the helm.
You're the helmsman.
You're the helmsman.
Oh, well.
Reggie
okay.
Helmsman Johnson. Yay, everybody. And that is, of course, because Reggie, you can laugh. Reggie's doing the thing that Gabe used to do. Reggie, let it out. I see you laughing and holding it back. He's being very Jewish.
I am listening to you.
Thank you so much for holding back your audible laughter, because that, if anything makes for good radio, it is that.
Ninja laughs.
Yeah, the ninja laugh. It makes it so much more powerful when he does laugh out loud, right? He makes us want it and work for it. And that's good. And we're going to be having a great show. We're going to be having a return guest, Nando Villa, the man who put reparations on the map. And we're going to have Premila Nadasen, who writes about domestic workers. And she's going to be talking to us about organizing and the minimum wage campaign, the living wage campaign, the Clintons, and why they're actually maybe just as bad as Reagan, which is crazy. But first, we're going to give you a little flavor of what our show was 2 weeks ago. We had a live show in the actual physical space at Brooklyn Commons. That is our want, right? And we're doing that the first Wednesday of the month, so you guys got to come down to 388 Atlantic Avenue. See us in the flesh.
Get some empanadas.
Get some wine. Watch us. It was so cool because a great guy, Freddie, I hope you're listening. I know you are. Freddie came and he said, "Hi, Katie. I just wanted to introduce myself to you. I'm Freddie, and I wanted to show you my brown eyes." Because as he knows, we have a brown eyes only policy on
when
the
it comes
show.
to guests.
When it comes to guests. We've let a couple people in out of a kind of guilt. Brown-eyed guilt, as it's known in the academic circles. But first, we're going to give you a little flavor of what our show was. So we're going to play you. What this was a feminist panel on Hillary versus Bernie. It's a very funny, cool part where we had people basically making the argument for their other candidates. We're pumped. We believe in having everyone at the table, literally. So that's why we have such a great, full-figured panel. What? The panel, Sally.
Wow.
First of all, real women have curves. I mean, they don't have to, but they definitely can be real and have curves. So what? Go on. You're fine. No. It's okay. We're curve positive in this community. I thought that we could start tonight's debate by doing a little bit of like a kumbaya thing, where we explain where we are on the candidates, but you make the best argument for the person you're not defending. Right? How's that? And we can hold hands too while we do it. But I'll happily start. Yeah, Sarah. Sarah Leonard of The Nation, senior editor at The Nation.
I'll make an argument for Hillary, who I'm not going to vote for, and
in the primary.
In the primary, at least.
Bad PR.
And the argument I would make is it seems absolutely transparently clear that no progressive president is going to get anything through the next Congress. And so if that's the case, and fundamentally everyone's platform is somewhat untenable, then why wouldn't you break a glass ceiling in the process and say, at least now girls and boys will grow up knowing that men are not more powerful than women. Women can boss them around, that's fine. And also, every woman will get a kick out of seeing a woman occupy the most powerful position in the world, perhaps. So I think that's a strong argument for Hillary, who I will not be voting for.
Okay. Wait, so which is your candidate? Just kidding. Okay. Thank
Rubio.
You. Nice.
I'm actually like a strong Rubio supporter.
I know, that's why we needed one Rubio supporter. Sally's our Cruz supporter.
Oh, thank God.
So
yeah.
Yeah,
it's good.
I'll take the Sanders argument.
Okay. Amanda Marcotte from Salon.
So the argument for Sanders, I think, is a pretty solid one, which is that, I would get a kick out of seeing somebody who calls himself a socialist. get the nomination for the Democratic nomination and possibly win, especially if he goes up against Trump, which is like going to be, I wouldn't call it a slam dunk, but I would say like nothing but net, you know?
Yeah. Enough of net. Hashtag enough of net. Okay, cool. Liza Featherstone of The Nation.
So, as someone very much on record as a Hillary opponent and Sanders supporter, I'll say some nice things about Hillary. I think one of the strongest arguments for Hillary is the explicit naming of some really important women's issues in this campaign that have thus then become part of the national debate. My favorite of those personally would be the Hyde Amendment, that she talks all the time about repealing the Hyde Amendment, which prevents so many low-income women from accessing abortion, and also paid family leave, which had already become a big part of the public discourse before this campaign, but I think her constantly talking about it has added a lot, and now even a horrible ghoul like Governor Andrew Cuomo is now a champion of it as well. So that's shout out to Hillary.
Jamia Wilson, feminist writer activist.
So I'll take a stab at talking about the candidate who I will not be voting for in the primary, who will be Bernie Sanders. Like many of my other South Carolinian black women brethren also agree with me. But what I will say is that I like the idea of a president who would be the first non-Christian president of this country. I think that would be a major step forward for us as a nation, specifically around the conversation of separation between church and state and the reality of that and setting that in motion. And I say this as a Christian. I also believe that medicinal marijuana and marijuana just being legal would be welcomed by many people in this country.
Awesome.
Would be awesome and welcomed. And I think that is something that Bernie Sanders has been bold enough to unapologetically carry the mantle for.
Sihem Millah from Maghreb for Bernie. Oh.
I'll go as I'll have a shout out for Hillary as well for, coming from an African country. I really admire her work in Central Africa to bring education to women and to children and actually make it an okay idea and a inspiring idea to go against your parents or your fellow community to seek an education and be powerful as a minority, as a woman, to actually work against the system and go for higher education and even make it all the way to a Western world and come back and help that community.
Candace Fortin from Rock for Bernie.
Okay, I'll give a little shout out for Hillary. I would say that I'm very impressed by her level of adaptability, her ability to see a lot of the frustrations and anger that are coming from the Democratic Party and progressives and their needs from a Democratic candidate at this point. I am impressed by that. Whether it's genuine or not, I'm not sure, but I am impressed by the fact that she can at least adapt to it and be a face for it. So that's pretty tenacious, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Tenacious C.
Yes, Tenacious C, yes.
Tenacious C reference. Someone can explain that. Ask someone, and C is for Clinton.
White guy
okay.
rap, yeah.
I thought that was a good reference.
Sally Cohn, the commentator on CNN.
I feel actually pretty proud to be a Democrat, and the debate the other night made me feel really good that we have two substantive candidates.
There wasn't enough talk of penises, though.
I know that was but there was 20 minutes
So
on trade policy.
If you want to talk shade, one of them isn't a Democrat.
Don't give shade to Hillary. How are you going to talk shade about Hillary like that?
My ass section, Marcotte. All right.
Why are you going to diss Hillary for being a Democrat?
I am generally more pro Bernie than Hillary, so here's what I would say about Hillary, genuinely, which is I think she'd be an amazing president. I have concerns. My concerns are more about what she would do as president. But I'll be honest, one of the things that has been troubling for me watching President Obama from the outside and also with friends who've been on the inside of his administration is I think he's an amazing campaigner. He has an amazing vision. He's an incredible communicator. He's not very interested in the details of governing and the sort of, nuts and bolts of bureaucracy. And I think she is. I think she would be an excellent executive. I think she would, manage government incredibly well. I think it would function better and well under her. And yes, I think the political environment would be really tough no matter who's elected, but I think she's really good at the hardball politics. And I also think, we've had a lot of people in political leadership who don't understand the right wing and who don't understand the kind of hate and backlash and anger and deep fire in the belly of the right. And I think she does. And in this moment in time, I would find that immensely comforting to have someone in the White House who really understands what we as a people are up against.
Great. Thank you, guys. Gabe?
You know what? Here, I got praise for both of them right now.
Nice.
Here we go. Bernie, he says everything that I like, and he's been saying it forever. As far as I can tell from watching all the video mashups, his views on gay marriage have stayed the same. His views on drugs and justice, and he's been a socialist through and through the whole time, and I like that. I would have voted for Eugene V. Debs if I was born a couple generations ago.
Who Bernie made a documentary about. Do you guys know that?
I didn't even know that. I just found out now that he got a real job late in life, and that's cool with me. When it comes to Hillary, I'm kind of worried that Bernie doesn't know anything about the world outside of the U.S. other than socialized health care in Europe.
And we are not Europe.
When it comes to Hillary, oh man, she's had every job. She knows what it's like on a local level being a fly on the wall when Clinton was governor. When Bill Clinton was governor, she was a corporate lawyer, knows how big business works, worked with Walmart. Awesome. She is...
Andrew Young was on their board, right?
She became a senator of a state that she wasn't really down with until she became the senator of that state. That's cool that New York, she was able to get New York to love her so instantly. And then what else is really cool about her? Oh, she foreign policy. She understands foreign policy. She was Secretary of State, which is the biggest role that you can have in the U.S. government when dealing with the rest of the world. So on paper, she's done all of the things. She's got qualifications on every level to become president. What I'm worried about is calling kids super predators and NAFTA.
Calling kids NAFTA is not cool.
Don't call kids.
It's CAFTA, guys.
I don't know.
Show some respect.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the burn. I want to make it very clear I don't hate Hillary Clinton. I would say that there are people who are progressive and who hate Hillary with the vitriol that they would not feel towards a man. And I think that supporting a candidate, despite that, not to be reactionary, but despite that is an important thing to say and show to the progressive movement. I would say that Hillary's strength and weakness would be her experience in foreign policy. She does have chops that Sanders doesn't have. Mm-hmm. But I think the chops are problematic, to use a diplomatic word. And I think this is something that it isn't discussed a lot. And we are going to leave it there because we want to have you on the edge of your seats in suspense. We're going to talk to a former guest who's been not only on the radio show but on the live show, and he's going to put this conversation in context because we need a man to do that, because out of affirmative action, out of our commitment to affirmative action, we've really overwhelmed Gabe and Reggie.
I need a third dude in here to just help explain everything to me.
And we couldn't get a third dude physically in here, but spiritually we will. And you can feel the testosterone is coming in through the airwaves. I don't know if you can hear it, people listening to the show, but we want to have just a little hot take before we have our interview with Premila Nadasen about domestic workers and how this country will be transformed by them, basically. So good news, unless you're a terrible racist sexist, in which case, sorry, trigger warning. But we're going to speak right now to Nando Villa of Fusion, the man who asked Bernie Sanders about reparations. Nando, are you there?
Hey, how are you guys?
Good, you?
I'm good. Happy to inject some testosterone into this low T fest.
Yes, estrogen is like literally drowning Gabe and Reggie. You have no idea. Their hands are up like above the estrogen, trying to reach out for help. And so
I'm here to help.
Yeah, Nando's here to the rescue. Like Mandy to the rescue. Remember that?
The
Do you guys know
testosterone
that?
smells like pennies.
Like pennies?
Yeah.
Really? Is that true?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Is that because I'm Jewish? Is that why you're saying that?
Wow,
I'm just
really?
kidding, Reggie. Come on.
Really?
I don't even believe anti-Semitism exists. It doesn't on a structural level. Anyway, but
wow.
I know I went there. I went there.
Yeah, you went there.
And speaking of Israel and Jews, we have an interesting little parallel with Nando. Not that he's either, but Nando, tell us where you're from, and then I'll explain that great analogy.
I'm from Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida. So why do I bring up the Jew-Israel thing? Because that's a big deal in Miami, Florida. You know what else is a big deal in Miami, Florida?
The Cuba thing.
Yes. On that note, can you please tell us what you felt about the Rubio loss? In case you guys didn't know, Marco Rubio, as if it's not enough that his brother served as a Green Beret and lost his 2 front teeth, which is true, and which Marco Rubio said during a debate.
My brother's a veteran. We're very proud of him in our family. He served as a Green Beret in the 7th Special Forces from 1968 through 1971. And as part of his training, he jumped out of an airplane and he lost his 2 front teeth. And for years, he's had to go to get these dental claims. And every time he goes to get one of these dental claims filled, the VA asks him, well, how do we know you lost your teeth in the Army? And he says, well, it's the only time I ever jumped out of a plane. But he's had to fight through this process, and I've watched it firsthand.
Because some people have lost arms and relatives, but the 2 front teeth are like the most important teeth.
Your chompers, what are you going to do without those?
Yeah,
you can't eat apples.
straw, right? So now the Rubio family has to face and deal with... Reggie's literally covering up his mouth with his hand. Take your hand down and laugh. Okay, so now the Rubio family has to deal with the loss of their older son's front teeth, and the loss of Marco's presidential aspirations. So please, can you share some insight into this?
Well, Marco Rubio is from Miami. So it turns out Miami-Dade County is the only county that he won in the Florida primary, which is a little sad given that he's the senator from Florida. Yeah, the Marco Rubio campaign has been defined largely by his donors. It's hard to remember a campaign that was more nakedly just whatever the donors say, that's whatever I'll say. Norman Brayman, who's a billionaire from Miami, major car dealership, used to own the Philadelphia Eagles. He's one of his donors. Paul, donor.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. I think it's because you're speaking truth to power, and Rupert Murdoch is reacting.
I think the Miami Illuminati is jamming the signal.
Yeah, Jose Marti Radio is taking over your line.
That tends to happen whenever I get on the phone.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay. It's shocking that a campaign that was basically designed to serve the interests of rich donors didn't get any support from actual voters.
That's a shame. Do you guys think it has anything to do with that dry mouth that Rubio experienced when he gave the response to the State of the Union address and grabbed a bottle of water mid-speech? Unclear, right?
Yeah.
It could.
Unclear.
That was like a weak
could
moment.
Be.
Reggie,
well, I mean, I think Chris Christie in the debate when he called him out for just repeating himself over and over again, I think that was probably the end of it.
Right. Chris Christie, big player. Also, Rubio presented himself and his family as having fled Castro, which they did on a time machine that let them do that because they fled under Batista, the guy before Castro.
Right. That was a pretty funny story, but that was a couple of years ago when that came out.
Right.
Rubio still managed to get past it. I mean, he maintained pretty strong Cuba cred amongst the local hardliners.
Right. And you were at the debate, correct, in Miami?
Yeah, the Democratic one.
Yeah, the Democratic one, sorry. And you work with Jorge Ramos.
I do.
The man who not only got kicked out of a press conference by Trump, so we already love him, but he also asked Clinton what would happen if she got indicted.
If you get indicted, would you drop out?
Oh, for goodness, that is not going to happen. I'm not even answering that question.
Yeah, and then she dismissed it. She refused to answer the question, yeah. And Ramos also got both Clinton and Bernie Sanders to promise not to deport anyone without a criminal record.
I want to be very specific. So you're telling us tonight that if you become president, you won't deport children who are already here?
I will not.
And that you won't deport immigrants who don't have a criminal record?
That's what I'm telling you. Now, I don't want, because I'm not contradicting what I told you in the interview. Asylum is a particular legal process. I'd like to see it changed. I'd like to see us give more support to people who come fleeing the terrible violence that they do. But under our law, we have a process we have to go through, which is different.
You would stop those deportations?
I would stop
the deportations for children
Yes.
and those who don't have a criminal record?
Of the people, the undocumented people living in our country, I do not want to see them deported. I want to see them on a path to citizenship. That is exactly what I will do.
Senator Sanders, can you promise us tonight that you won't deport children?
Let me just say this. I don't think that the Secretary fully answered your question. And I think the proof may be in the pudding. Honduras and that region of the world may be the most violent region in our hemisphere. Gang lords, vicious people, torturing people, doing horrible things to families. Children fled that part of the world to try, maybe, to meet up with their family members in this country, taking a route that was horrific, trying to start a new life. Secretary Clinton did not support those children coming into this country. I did. Now, I happen to agree with President Obama on many, many issues. I think he's done a great job as President of the United States. He is wrong on this issue of deportation. I disagree with him on that. So to answer your question, no, I will not deport children from the United States of America.
And can you promise not to deport immigrants who don't have a criminal record?
I can make that promise.
Which I thought was kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
It kind of went unnoticed, I think, in a lot of...
Well, not by Katie Halper.
No, not by Katie Halper,
Yeah,
obviously.
okay.
You catch everything.
Yeah. I mean, the big news story is Jorge Ramos gets them to promise not to deport people. Katie Halper notices.
Without criminal records, though.
Without criminal records, right. I noticed without having a criminal record. Hey,
so if they have gotten a
right.
jaywalking ticket, though, could they be deported?
Yeah, walking while Central American?
Is the jaywalking thing? I don't know if that counts as a criminal record, Gabe.
Outstanding. If they don't pay it?
Yeah, exactly.
An outstanding ticket?
I think it does if you're black, but not if you're not black.
Right, that's true.
Let's just,
Everyone knows that,
right. Any other hot takes from last time? We're going to start a segment called Non-Nuanced News. Wow, I realized we could do it with Nando, but that's not because you're not nuanced. I just mean we have these short little things, but it is quite alliterative when we have you on. So maybe we'll just find people whose names start with N in case you can't do it every week.
Right.
Although you should want to structure your weekly routines around non-nuanced news.
I'll try to make my hot takes less and less nuanced as
exactly.
possible.
So, like, if you have the chance to talk to Bernie Sanders again, you could be like, well, if it's not Wednesday between the hour of 6 and 7, maybe. Because I'll be doing the non-nuanced news.
Right.
But, yeah, any just quick takeaways from last night about anything you want, the elections, about the Supreme Court nomination, about whatever, the weather in L.A.?
I was kind of interested in the Supreme Court nominee. You know, it seems like an olive branch from Obama to the Republicans, but it seems like the Republicans have always beat back Obama's olive branches. That strategy has never worked for him.
Right.
So I was a little puzzled by that.
Yeah, like beating olive branches into plowshares.
Right.
I think that's from the Bible. Maybe my part, not yours, guys.
Right. Yeah.
Did you get to see Clinton or Sanders up close?
Are you not convinced that they actually exist? That they're just projections?
Yeah, they're holograms.
The plutocrats.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure they actually exist. I've touched Bernie Sanders, so he definitely exists.
In his heart or physically?
No, physically. I touched him
Where?
on his skin.
Where did you?
On his hand. I shook his hand.
Oh, you shook his hand. I got excited. I thought you put your hand on his. Or
on his,
on his bosom or hand. Just kidding. No, I thought you touched him as opposed to shaking his hand. But Gabe is kind of confused. That's because I guess technically anyone I've shaken hands with I've touched. I just don't think of it that way.
You don't think of it that way?
No, I think that's funny. It's interesting. I'm really learning a lot about myself. About boundaries, handshaking.
I like this idea that Hillary and Bernie could have been holograms, though. It would have been great to see him next summer at Coachella, performing.
Right.
Well, Nando, thank you so much. That's been the non-nuanced take with Nando. Just kidding. That's been the very nuanced first person take from a local Miamian. They are hard to come by and willing. They're hard to come by. It's hard to come by local Miamians willing to come on the Katie Halper show because maybe we don't agree on certain issues.
I might be the only one.
Yeah, you're right.
In the world. Yeah.
Thank God. Well, Nando, we will talk to you soon. Enjoy the LA weather. Say hi to Jorge. Say thanks for, say you're welcome for my noticing. And thanks for the deportation policy shift. And again, that was Nando Villa of Fusion. Check out his really cool video about the difference between Sanders and Clinton and kind of the left and liberals. And we'll play a clip of that. That'll be great.
Cool.
Okay. Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye. The fight between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton has been way nastier than anyone could have predicted. Remember when Clinton was supposed to coast to an easy coronation? Yeah, that didn't happen. And the reason the campaign has been so bitter is because they have a fundamental disagreement over what the government should do in America. Clinton believes that the government should create an even playing field. Then, it's up to you, the citizen, to succeed by working very hard and being more talented than your peers. She outlined this vision in her campaign launch speech.
President Roosevelt called on every American to do his or her part. It's America's basic bargain. If you do your part, you ought to be able to get ahead. And when everybody does their part, America gets ahead too.
Basically, the government is supposed to just give you a shot.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance.
And the rest is up to you. If you work really hard and are really smart, you'll succeed. If not, you won't. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, believes that the government should work to create an equality of outcomes. Basically, that everyone deserves a similar level of economic security no matter how hardworking or talented they are. Here is Bernie Sanders' campaign launch speech.
As Franklin Delano Roosevelt reminded us, a nation's greatness is judged not by what it provides to the most well-off, but how it treats the people most in need. And that is the kind of country we must become.
To be fair, Clinton's vision of America is the one that's been programmed into our American brains from birth by both political parties and basically every institution in our lives. And it's an idea that sounds very fair and good on the surface. But what Bernie Sanders is arguing is that the notion that America is a real meritocracy is a total sham.
The economy is rigged. Rigged.
Is the economy rigged? R-I-G-G-E-D.
This becomes obvious when you look at how much richer the top 1% has gotten in recent decades. But the flaws in our so-called meritocracy can be seen in other, less obvious areas. For example, did you know that the easiest way to predict a child's SAT scores is to look at his parents' tax returns? By now, you've all heard of the 1% versus the 99%. The fight for the Democratic Party is this. On the one side, the argument is that the 1% should include more women, minorities, and LGBT people. On the other side, that the 1% shouldn't exist at all. So there you have it. This thing only boils down to the small little matter of what you believe to be fundamentally just and equal. No pressure.
And that was Nando Villa Fusion. And now we are so excited to talk to our special guest of the hour. This is a big deal, guys.
Who is it?
It is Premila Nadasen, who is an author, professor. And Premila Nadasen is also the author of Household Workers Unite. And she's giving a talk at the Tamiment Library in New York City, March 22nd, between 6 and 7:30. Premila, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Premila.
Katie. How are you?
Good, you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming. And again, you also wrote Welfare Warriors, the welfare rights movement in the United States.
That's right. So I'm really interested in the questions of low-income women, especially women of color, and organizing for economic justice.
Right. And that's the relationship between your writing and research and kind of your positions and electoral politics versus social organizing, and maybe that's a false dichotomy. Mm-hmm. Did I ask you enough questions up front? Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Well, I think that social movement organizing plays a huge role in electoral politics, although it doesn't always necessarily do so directly, in the sense that social movement organizing, I think, pushes political debate in a particular direction. And so we've seen, over the past 15 years, starting with Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter, the Fight for 15 movement, domestic worker organizing, we've seen much more focus and attention to questions of economic inequality in this country. And I think that has sort of created a space for somebody like Bernie Sanders to emerge as a potential leading candidate it has forced someone like Hillary Clinton, who's actually quite moderate in our politics, to begin to address questions of economic justice and poverty. And so I think that social movement organizing plays a big role in kind of framing the political issues at any given moment.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote a really interesting article that's pretty related to what's happening now, called "How a Democrat Killed Welfare." And you open it with, Bill Clinton's 92 election was meant to be a turning point in American politics. Liberals breathed a sigh of relief, believing him to be a much-needed break from the Reagan-Bush era of small government and social welfare cuts. Rather than offering a reprieve from punitive austerity, Clinton took the Reagan-Bush agenda a step further. If his administration was a turning point, it turned us in the wrong direction. Now, that's a pretty bold claim. And, of course, at the Katie Halper Show, we're all about bold claims. But I had a question for you about it being worse, the policies of Clinton being worse. Is it that they're worse objectively on an absolute level, or are they worse relative to our expectations because they're more of a betrayal?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think there were high expectations about Clinton's election, and certainly that has kind of shaped the disappointment of people who are on the left. But I also think objectively his policies were much worse. And so I think we can look at two things in particular. We can look at the 1994 crime bill, which gave the federal government a much bigger role in questions of mass incarceration. It pumped federal money into state law enforcement, and really fueled this whole phase of mass incarceration that has created all sorts of social, political, and economic problems today. And then I think the other issue that we could look at is welfare reform. And Clinton was responsible for essentially dismantling the Aid to Families with Dependent Children program, which was the economic support system for single parents and their children. It is incredibly difficult for poor single parents today to get any kind of economic assistance. There is a 5-year maximum lifetime limit, 2-year consecutive limit on welfare. There are now work requirements for anybody who is receiving either welfare assistance or food stamps. And it makes it very, very difficult for parents who are trying to struggle, who are trying to find childcare, who have difficulty working in jobs because of questions of transportation, who are having trouble paying their rent. So I do think that Clinton's policies did make things worse for poor people and for poor people of color in particular.
Was it almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing that Bill Clinton was a Democrat coming in? What was the motivation behind sort of these very very punitive and punitive and like sort of criminalizing poor people? Was this something having to do with his own personal philosophy, or was it trying to appease the Republican sensibilities of the time coming out of Reagan and Bush era administration?
That's a great question, and I don't think it was necessarily a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think that the period of the 1990s was a relatively conservative period when we look at electoral politics. And so there was a lot of concern among both Republicans and Democrats at that time about questions of crime, about questions of whether or not people were, quote unquote, dependent upon welfare for the long term. Now, Bill Clinton was a moderate. He was a relatively conservative Democrat, and he didn't hide that. But he did talk about the problems of crime even during his election. He talked about trying to end welfare as we know it. So, it was very clear, I think, from the outset that he was going to take a fairly conservative position on these particular issues.
Right. And I think that's an interesting question that Gabe raised. It's pretty fundamental, kind of, is how much the Clintons, both of them, are motivated by a political philosophy, how much they're motivated by pragmatism. And then I think there's a third issue, which is a kind of combination of personal and political, which is how much of it is a power thing, right? As opposed to, in other words, giving themselves power. And I don't mean to sound kind of paranoid. I just think that this probably happens to a lot of politicians, that there's a kind of a merging of pragmatism and political pragmatism, and also personal kind of careerism, professional desires. I don't know if you can speak to that because you don't, you probably haven't talked to them. But you know what? You also don't need to talk to them to speak to that.
No, I don't. I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, Bill Clinton was an incredibly ambitious politician. Right. Hillary Clinton is an incredibly ambitious politician, and they actually have that in common. And so I think it was absolutely about personal power, and I think they pushed the Democratic Party further to the right. It wasn't all that radical to begin with, and prior to to his presidency, but they certainly moved the party further and further to the right. And I think we see something very similar with Hillary Clinton right now in the election in terms of her own personal ambitions really dominating, especially during the early part of the election season, her concerns, her issues, the way she framed things. And I think the question for me is the primary issue right now that we want the first woman president? And I think a lot of people are questioning that and saying, well, perhaps that's not the most important thing when we have, very serious political issues that this country has to address.
And I actually have a question for you about that issue and kind of the identity politics aspect of what's going on. So 2 questions. One is I find it hard as a woman. I'm frustrated because I know there's a double standard, and I know that Hillary is seen as more calculating and more Machiavellian than she is because she's a woman. But she also...
Hello, Katie. Hello, I just lost you for a little bit.
Are you there? Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
You see what happened? I start criticizing Hillary Clinton and talking about sexism and nuance, and what happens? We get cut off. We know. The 2 issues. There's a racial issue. Of course, race is a construct, but let's not pretend that... I should say race issue or racist issue, right? But and a gender one. So lots of people are saying that non-black people are telling black people what's in their best interest, and that they are being kind of naive. How can people talk about this issue without reinforcing that dynamic, for one? And then also, how can we talk about Hillary's Machiavellian and calculating nature without reinforcing the kind of Lady Macbeth narrative of a woman being cold and unnatural when she's like that? Because I think, Gabe, you can laugh. Why? Because I think I'm torn as a feminist. I'm actually pretty frustrated that I'm being put in the position to be expected to talk for a woman who I also think her policies are, I'm an anti-femicide feminist for Sanders. Anyway, but could you address either of those issues or both of them?
Sure. And I'll start with the question of Hillary as a feminist, and I would say first off that there are multiple definitions of feminism. Right. And the issue of sort of a single individual kind of embodying feminist struggle and her own individual achievements embodying that feminist struggle is something that I disagree with. I mean, I don't think that feminist struggle is about seeing individual women achieve power. For me, it's about a set of policies and a set of politics. So for me, Hillary Clinton does not embody feminism. She is a particular kind of feminist. I think she calls herself a feminist, and I think she's trying to frame her campaign in that way. But I think we really do have to look at the issues, and we have to look not just at whether or not she's a woman, but what's best for women. And, if we go back to the question of welfare reform that she was very supportive of, and up until very recently has said she thought it was a very good piece of legislation, that was a bill that was not good for women. It was absolutely not good for poor women.
Right. I think she's benefited from feminism. I don't consider supporting her a feminist act. I was more talking about the fact that there are double standards, and at the same time, like I think let's say she's like well, this is so not nuanced, and I feel bad and embarrassed because you're an academic and super smart, but let's say Hillary's like an 8 out of 10 on the Machiavellian calculating scale. There are probably some people who see her as a 9 or 10 because she's a woman, but that doesn't mean that she's not an 8.
Right, absolutely, and that, to me, is somewhat of a separate issue. I mean, there's all kinds of sexism and racism in media portrayals of individuals. Right. And that, to me, doesn't justify either supporting somebody or not supporting them. So
I think we all agree here.
Yeah, so we could look at news coverage and say, of course, this is unfair and she shouldn't be cast in that particular way.
Right.
But I don't think it necessarily means that we ought to support her because there are lots of people who are victims of sexist media coverage.
Right. And also, I mean, her policies, we talked about this last time, if you don't like femicide, which I'm going to guess none of us in this room or you, Pramila, does. Liza Featherstone made this point. If you kind of want to empower women and don't want femicide and don't want war and destruction, you probably aren't going to be that enthusiastic about Clinton.
How is she able to get so many poor women of color to identify with her as the best candidate?
Well, I think that
Oops, we lost you. Sorry. Can you move closer to the phone line that you're standing right next to?
Is that better?
Yeah, the cell phone tower that you're perched upon. Yeah.
I don't think that Bernie Sanders has the same kind of name recognition that Hillary Clinton does. So I think she's already starting from an advantage, and so I think there are people who might not be as directly engaged in politics or are as aware about the issues, who just understand that Hillary Clinton is a Democrat and perhaps support her because of the perceived legacy of Bill Clinton as well as her own accomplishments.
Right.
Bill Clinton, if you remember, back in the 90s, was often called the first black president.
Right.
So there's a kind of loyalty among African Americans towards the Clintons, and I think that's part of the reason why her African American support is as high as it is. Now, I would be interested in looking at an age breakdown among African Americans because I haven't seen that data yet. But I would imagine that a lot of younger African Americans are supporting Bernie Sanders and not Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And we've had a couple of really important individuals, and Michelle Alexander is one of those, who has come out and said that
why black people
the Clintons,
don't. Sorry. Okay,
exactly, that that the Clintons don't deserve, or Hillary does not deserve the African American vote, and Ta-Nehisi Coates is another one. So I think it's really important to kind of not lump the entire African American community together because I think they're important sectors. Students are another one who are in fact supporting Bernie Sanders or who are sitting out the election altogether because they're not happy with either candidate.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. The representation of kind of a monolith is obviously problematic.
And I wasn't saying why are all Hillary's
I wasn't saying
but
that
more,
you were saying that.
Yeah, but how? I guess, and that's why I didn't want to say why. I wanted to say how. So what are her strategies to sort of how is she galvanizing?
Well, she does have the first black president as her husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does, and I also think her framing her election as an important part of the feminist struggle is also shaping how people are perceiving her and why certain working class women, black and white, might choose to support her. I mean, I think we also, there's been a lot of media coverage about why African Americans are supporting Hillary Clinton. I think we also have to ask the question of why women of all racial backgrounds are supporting Hillary Clinton, given her anti-feminist policies.
Right. And, of course, you're referring to welfare reform, right? And the sorry? Yeah.
And the crime bill, yes, and things like that. Yep.
Created.
Right. And she has not come out in support for the Fight for 15 movement.
Right.
I mean, her most recent comments that I've read is that she said, well, we need to fight for $12 an hour. And when we look at things like the Fight for 15 movement, it's disproportionately, poor working class women who are employed in fast food restaurants as home health care aides, who are in these jobs where they're not earning enough to support their families.
Right. Well, Pramila Addison, thank you so much for joining us. We totally need to have you back, and we'll have you live in studio so we can have the energy of being in person and the static-free communication. And where can people find you online? And everyone make sure you go to the event next on the 22nd at the Tammany Library. And what's your Twitter handle or website?
At Pramila Addison and PramilaAddison.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Pramila. This has been
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. See you soon in person. This has been the Katie Halper Show with Katie Halper, Gabe Pacheco, Reggie Johnson on the keys. And we're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and on iTunes and SoundCloud. Thanks,
and you can
guys.
find me at Gabe_Pacheco
Yes.
on Twitter.
And I'm KT Halps on Twitter. And we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.